What's the most important part of the golf swing? Impact. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Golf Test Dummy, the channel where I use my game to help your game, even though it completely ruins my game sometimes. Before we get into this video, I want to ask you one small favor. This channel is closing in on 5,000 subscribers. I would love to hit that number sooner rather than later and just keep on rocketing past that. If everybody here that comments on these videos and likes these videos, I hear from you often, I know who the regulars are, take a second, pause this video, hit the share button and send it off to somebody or a group of people in an effort to try and grow this channel much faster and make it larger to reach a larger number of people. I would appreciate that very, very much. All right, let's get into today's video, the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about today. We're talking about impact. There are a couple of stages to impact. There's the initial contact between the club face and the golf ball. Hopefully it's the club face and not the S word, that comes off of the face of the golf club. But the face of the golf club meeting the golf ball, that initial contact point, that's basically kind of stage one. And then stage two would be the compression of the golf ball. If you've swung with some speed and you've got the correct impact conditions, you should compress that golf ball, and that would be the middle stage. And then the last stage would be when the golf ball expands back outward, explodes off of the club face, and travels 574 yards off into space. Now, a lot of you guys out there have probably heard of Mike Malaska. Mike has taught quite a few high-level golfers. He's had a very long teaching career. He has tons of videos on YouTube. If you haven't seen him, if you've been living under a rock maybe, you should go check out his YouTube channel, Mike Malaska. Go check him out. But one of his big things is to start with impact. If you get impact correct, if you get that position of the club at impact correct, and then you go outward from there, you can develop your backswing and then your downswing and your follow through and finish from that impact position. And that's what I want to work on a little bit today. I want to start with what is a good impact, and then I want to think about how to create a setup that gets you that impact easily and repeatable for you. What might be repeatable for me may not be for you. It might not be ideal, but I'm going to work through what helps me to get to the right impact, and maybe that'll help you find what gets you to your correct impact. Let's start from the very beginning here, okay? A good impact is when this golf ball and the sweet spot, which is generally the middle of this club face, meet. And then the ball crushes against it. That's called compression. And then the ball expands and explodes off of the club face. It goes toward the target. We've already established that. But the sweet spot of this golf club, if you hold this club straight up in the air like this, with the shaft going completely vertical and the ball sitting on the ground, you'll notice that the ball can't quite get up to that sweet spot. So how do you get the sweet spot to meet up with the golf ball and compress, which is what creates the really good shots, right? The only way to do that is have that forward shaft lean at impact, that forward shaft lean, the handle leading the club head, leading the race to the golf ball, the handle crossing first, then the shaft, then the club head. In that order, you have to have this shaft leaning just a little bit. And if you take this from vertical and you lean the shaft forward, the ball can actually come into contact with the sweet spot of the golf club. So you have to have a slightly descending blow. You have to have that little bit of shaft lean where the handle is outracing the club head at impact in order to get compression. Now that we know that the sweet spot has to make contact with the golf ball, and that from this completely shaft vertical position, that's probably not going to happen. You're going to dig a little bit of ground at or before the golf ball. That's not going to be correct. You don't want to have too much forward shaft lean, because now you've de-lofted this club and turned a 9-iron effectively into about a 5 or a 4-iron. You don't want to have the shaft leaning away from the target at all. Now, if our goal is to set up for impact here, we're trying to build a really good impact, and we know that the shaft has to be leaning toward the target with the butt end of the club ahead of the club head itself. Maybe it's easier for some of you to start in a different position than you actually want to finish. But for a lot of us out there, I feel like that shaft vertical at setup may just be arbitrary. It might just be the result of somebody coming out and saying, you know what, let's set up athletic, let's set up completely balanced, then we'll figure out how to move and get back to the ball in the correct way. But let's just start out set up and balanced, right? But does it really make sense to come in here and set this club vertically and then set up to a vertical alignment of the shaft and then make a series of compensations and movements that gets you to a completely different position with the golf club? Why not go ahead and set that golf club in there, get it leaning a little bit toward the target, and then set up to the club? It just kind of seems arbitrary or made up to me to set up in a very neutral sort of way that forces you to come up with some way to move your body and get into a different position. Start the club where you want the club to finish. Start right here and then take your grip. Step in and set up to the club rather than setting the club up to you. If you remember last week's episode, I was talking about the universal golf swing and how the club is universal and all of us are the variables. Well, in science, you want to have controls and you want to have variables in any test. That's the scientific method. And the more controls you can have and the less variables you have, the more likely you're going to be able to produce an outcome that you predicted in the beginning. So if the club is not going to change and we know that the club has to be in a certain position at impact, let's set the club where it needs to be and then we set up to the club rather than trying to make the club conform to how we just feel we should be setting up. So if the club's leaning a little bit forward and then I set up to an already pre-positioned club that's ready to make impact with the ball, really I could just make a small movement back and through and I should be able to produce a shot, even a small swing that gives me a pretty good impact. We're going to try it out. A small swing back and through and I get good, crisp, solid contact and I know it hit the sweet spot of that golf club because you can hear it, you can feel it, you can see the result of it, and it takes very little effort to get that golf ball to jump off of that club face and go where you want it to go. Now, if you can make some short pitches and chips like that, a lot of people would say, yeah, that's great. But most people, when they set up for chips and pitches, they're already pre-positioning themselves anyway. They get a little bit more weight forward. They go ahead and get that forward shaft lean because they're not going to have the time in such a short swing to be able to make a complicated series of movements and weight shifts and rotations and up and down with the golf club and to get the club back into a position that they need to for impact when it comes to full swings. Well, what if you could? What if all you had to do was make a bigger chip swing or a bigger pitch swing? I'm going to put you down the line here for a second, but if I set this club in basically where I want it to impact and I kind of line the club face up with my target line, I get the face and the leading edge running perpendicular to my target line, and then I follow that same principle about setting the club and then setting myself up to the club's position at impact, and I get that forward shaft lean in the beginning and then I set up to that. I need to feel here that instead of taking the club just back a short distance and through, that I can take it back further. Well, if I keep in mind that I want my swing path to be from the inside a little bit, and I want it to be shallow, and I want it to be descending, and I just sort of make a series of movements like this, I feel like I'm coming right back to the golf ball at a good impact position. So if I take it away and I have to come out of that position, it's probably not a good thing. I probably should take it back up to a point where I feel like things are going to start to break down. Maybe if this gets too much here or this goes too much there, I just need to take it away to a point to where I feel like I've still got that relationship maintained and I can return right back down to the golf ball with a very simple movement that doesn't involve dynamically changing throughout a very short golf swing. Guys, if you've been getting the same results for a long time by trying all of these conventional theories, all of these conventional wisdoms that many of the talking heads in the golfing world are putting out there, I would urge you to try something a little bit different. Don't be afraid to get off the road and find your own path through the woods. The things that you've done your entire life are completely relatable to your golf, I guarantee you. And if you figure out how to make your body get that club back to that impact position with a very simple movement, and nothing's really arbitrary. Play around with how you set up to the golf ball. Let how that club is going to swing and how you're going to deliver that club into the ball guide your body into a position to where it's at its starting point, how it is at address. If you get that address to match what you want to do with the club, rather than setting up square and then trying to figure out a complicated series of manipulations and movements to get you to a predetermined impact, it may lead you down a path to better golf. More videos on this subject coming. Subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much for sharing these videos. Leave me a thumbs up down below and some comments with your thoughts. I'll see you in the next episode.